Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to the first ever review discussion brought to you by Borderline Entertainment. I'm your host for this panel. My name is Asa Green River. I'm not going to say the big cheese, but I'm a face that you've probably seen a lot with BLE content, and I'm glad to have you here. Now, we do have our written reviews on our website, and we do have the Borderline Bottomlines, the 60-second review. But this is where we dig into those topics a little bit further with some of our friends from around the internet. So I've got some amazing guests tonight, but before, I don't know why I said tonight, we're recording midday. But before I jump into that, I just want to say thank you so much to our Patreon supporters. You all have been amazing. You've helped us to make more content, and I would implore you, if you're not supporting, please consider supporting today so we can make even more content and maybe do this full time, because that's what we would love to do, is to make more content all the time just for you. But with that said, I can't wait anymore. I have to introduce these people because they're super freaking awesome. So let's pull them in. Joining us today, we have our very own Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity reviewer for Borderline Entertainment, Nate Pressler.
Hey everyone, I'm excited to dive into this. It is a very fun game.
And as you can see, we have such a wonderful fellow, an amazing person, one of the nicest people I've ever met, and super talented, and reviewed the game as well for DualShockers. We have Sam Woods. Sam, how are you?
You are too kind, my friend. You're too kind. I'm doing very good on this, what are we, Sunday afternoon over here. I'm doing good.
Good. Well, listen, as I said, this is a review discussion, and if you haven't gathered by the look on the screen, the title of the video, and the fact that I said it once before, we're going to be talking about Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. We're going to dive into it in the same way that we write our reviews here at BLE, diving into 5 different unique sections of the game, and we're going to try to... we'll get into some spoilers, right? Like, we decided, we'll get into some spoilers here and there, but we'll make sure to give you some sort of warning. I was a little bit iffy on that when we were talking about it before, but it's mainly for my own selfish reasons, because I'm the loser on this panel who hasn't finished the game. So I'm going to have some things spoiled for me so you all can get the best take. But we're going to dive right into things. And I have to say that, again, my name is Asa. I would wear a green tunic every day if I could, and I'm excited to be here. Okay. Let's dive into the presentation of the game. And Nate, if you wouldn't mind starting us off, talk to us about the presentation of Hyrule Warriors.
Yeah, so presentation of the game is phenomenal. I'm going to sound like a Nintendo fanboy. I'm going to sound like a Zelda fanboy, an Age of Calamity fanboy. I own that. I would wear a badge. I would wear a patch, whatever, put it on me. It's great. This is one of the high points for the game. So from the fact that the art direction is the exact same throughout the cutscenes, throughout the actual gameplay, throughout the world map, the menus, all of it is just, it screams Breath of the Wild. You can really tell that Koei Tecmo worked very closely. They said it in the video, and you can always say, oh yeah, okay, you worked really closely and everything was great, but you can tell that they worked really, really closely, and it is a painstaking recreation to make sure that it is in the same world. You never feel like kind of uncanny valley about it, and that's what's really important. It's just, I mean, I booted it up, and the familiarity of the game that I've sunk more than 120 hours into over the last 3 years was there, and it was so amazing, and it was so well done. It doesn't feel like a spin-off. That's the thing, is like Hyrule Warriors, the original one, even the definitive edition on the Switch, it felt like you could tell, okay, this is a spin-off, but this really feels like it is part of Breath of the Wild through the presentation alone.
Yeah.
And so I was wowed by the demo, and then even after the demo, it almost, you hit like a plateau where there's like the shelf, and it just opens up into the giant sea of what this game is all about.
That demo, and Sam, I don't know, did you play the demo at all before you jumped into the main game?
So I played the demo on the Friday morning before my copy of the game arrived, just because I wanted to get a little jump start on it. I knew I was getting the game before the demo, so I used that demo to ease me into the game, and then as soon as my game arrived, swapped it over.
Yeah. I waited so long to play the demo because I didn't want it to be spoiled for me. But then Nate, you told me that your save data actually carried over, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" So like it was like the Friday before the game came out. I played the demo all weekend long, like as much as I could, did every single mission that it would allow me to do, and I was like thoroughly impressed. Like talking about the presentation alone, from like the moment that you boot up the game and you start going through the menus to start playing, like at least for me, like I felt like I was back in the world of Breath of the Wild. Like, and that was just something that over and over again as I was playing, I kept forgetting that it wasn't like Breath of the Wild 2 or, you know, Breath of the Wild prequel. Like, this is a Hyrule Warriors game through and through. But they did so well at, like, not just the visuals, but the audio. So, like, going through the menus, the music, the voice acting, just the package as a whole, they did a really good job. I don't want to say they, like, swindled us and like did the old like 1-2 punch of like making you think it's going to be something that it's not, but they really did a great job in my opinion.
Well, and Asa, one thing you said too is that it is almost can trick you into thinking that it's like a true mainline Zelda game. I know it's coming out in the West obviously next year, but Persona 5 Scramble, which will be Persona 5 Strikers, same kind of reviews across Japan, was that this doesn't feel like a Warriors game. It feels like a Persona game with Warrior gameplay.
Right.
So to be able to kind of think, okay, I hope it's more like that too, it felt more fluid. And it just, again, it was one of those things where you hear like the Sheikah Slate boot up for the first time, and that little like jingle it just takes you back and you're like, I'm here. It's fantastic.
I think that that was it for me, was the sound design. I think the art direction and the whole Breath of the Wild thing is fantastic, but it is the little sound bites that really kind of take you into that world, and that's what really done it for me.
Definitely.
So the one thing that I also want to bring about with the presentation, do you feel like, because this is a Breath of the Wild game, do you feel like at any point that the devs had a moment to add in their own flair? Because like you look at past Warriors games, like if we're looking specifically at ones that I think did it to this level, I think Fire Emblem Warriors, I thought that one is another really good one that hit the brand really well. But talking about more specifically the other Hyrule Warriors, you know, they were able to put their own flair on it to the point that the Link that they had on the cover was a different Link that we hadn't seen in other games. Like aesthetically, he looked different. As someone who hasn't finished the game yet, and you two obviously have as our our reviewer panelists, do you ever feel like the developers got to put in their own flair within the presentation, or do you feel like they were pretty like locked into keeping everything Breath of the Wild branding, if that makes sense?
I think presentation wise they were probably pretty locked. I know Nintendo could be pretty strict about that sort of thing. I think where they took the kind of liberties and had a bit more freedom, which we'll get into later, is probably more the story side of things, where they were able to run a bit more with it, with some of the side missions and some of the kind of characters and stuff. I think that's more where the freedom of design would have come, rather than the kind of art or anything like that.
Okay.
I would agree with Sam. I would say the only thing that I think could potentially, in terms of how it was presented, would be some of those like finishing moves were a little grandiose in different ways, which not in a bad way at all. But I think that, yeah, it was more so that they were given kind of this roadmap of, hey, here are the kind of staples to make this feel like a Zelda game. And then they did allow for some more of that little like cheeky, little quirky kind of differences in the story.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, I do think the differences in the runes between each kind of character was kind of cool. How each one didn't just kind of throw a remote bomb. Each one had their unique way of doing it, which was definitely a nice touch.
And that was something that really made me think of fighting games. So like What I mean by that is like when you're playing a fighting game, um, just like let's just say Smash for example, keep it very like Nintendo on brand. Like you play as every single character. Like you know that everybody has a punch, a kick. Everybody has their up B, down B, directional B. But you want to see what everybody does. Like what is that unique thing that each character brings to the table that makes it wholly their own? And that's what I found myself doing constantly. Is okay. Let me with the controls like without bleeding too far into some of our other sections, like let me expand um, let me expand Link and play every single combination that I can possibly can to see like visually like what it looks like, what his combos end up being. Let me play as Zelda and see how she evolves and like as you add other combos, how does it look when she does it? Like I love like you said specifically the remote bomb, Sam. Like the way that Link does his remote bombs, where he just throws them everywhere, versus the way that Zelda has that like she can control the little like walking bomb spitter thing, or she could like back off and just let it do its thing while she continues to fight. Like that's so cool. So I really like that I like the fact that the devs were able to throw in their flair that way. But let's hop into the next section. Let's talk about performance before we start really getting into more of the story and how it plays and how we feel about that. Because we've got a comment here, and this is from Chris V on Twitter, and he says, honestly, is it worth it? How does it run? Because I've seen tons of frame rate issues, and that's what's been holding me back. And thank you, Chris, so much for submitting that question via Twitter. But Sam, I'll throw it to you to start the performance section. Is it worth it? Like to his question, what do you think?
I think the game is absolutely worth it. Like, I'm not like somebody who lives for the highest frame rate. If I'm going to be playing a game, I'll generally put it on the prettier mode and suffer a slightly worse frame rate. Mm-hmm. I mean, it can get fairly rough at times. Like, I'm not going to dance around the issue. There are some points where things get pretty rough, but credit where credit's due. Like, there's a lot going on in that game. There's loads of enemies on screen, cool animations, like this big vibrant world. With the power of the Switch, I think naturally in a game like this, you're probably going to get some frame rate drops until we get the Switch Pro. But if you can look past that, then it's absolutely worth it. I don't think it at any point was like a massive detriment to the game. And it wasn't a constant thing. It was only sporadically kind of here and there.
Yeah, I haven't run into any issues yet myself. Whether it was in the demo or it was like the main game, but I also have been playing docked, and I think it's fair to mention I have not done handheld. I don't know what your experience is, the two of you, what it was like. Did you play in handheld mode at all? Where did you primarily play it, and where did you feel like you encountered the most issues?
So I played it almost exclusively docked, which is a rarity for me because my Switch gets 95% of its playtime in handheld mode. But this one, I specifically wanted to play it in docked because there is so much going on. Like I struggled to keep up on the smaller screen. That's where I had my issues, even when it was docked. But like I say, it wasn't the end of the world. Like short spurts here and there with a few frame rate issues, but then it was back up and fine.
And so very similar. I played the majority of it docked. There were some times where I would be playing it portable, but I would only play like the smaller missions, or if you unlock a new character and you have to go through kind of like their training and figure out how to play as that character. Those ones where there weren't as many people on the screen, or it was like a 3 or 4 minute mission. Yeah. I would do that undocked, but for the main kind of to try to be like a purist, I wanted to see it on my big TV.
Yeah.
And the biggest times I ran into issues were running, being the Guardian, like driving the Guardians, controlling them rather. There were some times where there was some pretty big frame rate drops there, which is understandable because, again, like Sam said, there are a lot of things on the screen. And so if your mission is to kill 40,000 people before the end of the time, like that means there are that many people that you have to go through. Urbosa, I will say, she's fantastic. She has one of the coolest moves. That's a lot of lightning and a lot of people. And so the Switch was very much getting hot during those times, which is not always the best. But at the same time, you kind of felt like a badass because you're like, what I am doing right now is literally causing the game to slow down because that's how powerful I am. So I didn't take it as a bad thing. I was like, she's boss. She's great. She's just doing her.
Yeah. And I was getting a lot of, kaiju vibes, Power Rangers. Like, I think, so the first Divine Beast that I did Mipha, because that was like when I initially saw the trailers, she was the first champion. I'm like, I want to play as Mipha. She's boss. She's got the light scale trident all the way. And so that moment when you see Ruta, I'm forgetting the name. They're gonna call me a fake fan. Is it Ruta? Do you guys know?
I think it's Ruta.
Va Ruta?
I think it is.
Okay.
I think it is.
Okay. So like that moment when Va Ruta is coming out of the water and like water's like falling off and it's just this giant mech elephant. I'm like, these are just straight up Power Ranger vibes. This is the best thing ever. Like, I want some hard electric guitar going. And I also knew in that moment, I'm going to hit some slowdown. So like that was the first and only time, like you, Nate, that I think that I ever experienced any sort of slowdown was when piloting the Divine Beast. And it would only be like that mission specifically. And this is pretty early on. But I'll still say spoilers. Come back in like 2 minutes if you don't want to hear what this small mission's like. But like you're going through and you're obviously just destroying millions and millions of moblins and bokoblins. But at the very end, there's just like a wall of Lionels and they're all just like firing off. And it was in that moment of like 50 Lionels firing their lightning arrows into the air and me doing an immediate trunk sweep and then firing my Divine Beast blast that there was the slightest chug. But I think I never thought about it this way, but I think the way that you put it, Nate, was exactly how I was feeling. I've got so much power that the screen just can't handle all of my power. So it wasn't anything that like broke immersion for me. But did either of you ever experience anything that was, hey, this is choppy, or had any freezes or bugs that like was really pulling you out of the experience? Because the game is fairly long, so if you went the whole time with nothing, that's huge.
So mild spoiler warning, but not really. Again, come back in 2 minutes unless you want to get some environmental spoilers. Later in the game, there are some really tough quests, like side quests that are you have to kill a certain amount of bad guys in a certain amount of time, and there are some big bad guys, and there's a lot of fire because there's a lot of ruin and things like that. And between the fire, Urbosa, because I basically played as her during those missions, and then having like 3 Lionels shooting different elemental arrows at you, then I experienced some serious chug. But again, there was only like one time where I think it skipped enough where I got hit by something, and that was kind of frustrating. But it didn't totally wreck my immersion. And again, I was like, well, now I know next time, because I died. I was like, now I know next time to get this person first, because this guy will move across the screen before this guy will. And so it just made me be more strategic, so I didn't have to experience that, which I don't know if that's what the devs wanted, but that's what ended up happening, and it worked out, and then I didn't have to experience any of that slowdown.
Yeah, for me, aside from a few kind of moments of lower frame rates, nothing game breaking, no crashes, no major bugs. Like for me, it felt smooth for most of the time, and like say, considering everything that's going on that screen, it's a pretty impressive feat.
Yeah, and it is running a solid 30 frames. Like I wish that I could see this game 60 frames. I feel like it would be like, now that we have these new next gen consoles, the PS5 and the Series X, like I just want fidelity and performance mode options on every single game that I play. So if there ever is a Switch Pro, please Nintendo, give me, like, I'll keep the 1080. I don't need 4K, but just give me that smooth, crisp 60 frames, especially in a Warriors game where there are millions of, or thousands of enemies that are on the screen. Okay, so performance, I think, was actually pretty good, some slight slowdown, but I want to jump into practicality. Is the story cohesive? Do the controls make sense? Are they complementary? How is the UI, the menu systems? Does everything feel like it makes sense overall? And To that, we have another question from Twitter, and this is from Bald Fi or Bald Fi. Just let me know in the comments if I got that wrong. But people are upset about the story being different from the actual Great Calamity. But I think in a series that tells much of its story indirectly, it's cool to get a different version and infer what we can about the events leading to Breath of the Wild from there. So, really, what I'm thinking about this, as somebody who's about 15 hours into the game, maybe 12, I think the story's incredible. I love Breath of the Wild. It's easily in my top 3 favorite Zelda games. It's not number 1. Sorry, Sam. But the one criticism that I have about Breath of the Wild is that by the end, even though I thought the story was amazing, I just wanted a little bit more. And I think where I felt the most let down were in the DLCs, like the Champions Ballad and all of those other ones. Like I wanted to get more story DLC and I didn't get that. But this game, holy cow, there is so much story in this game. And I think what really, really surprised me is not just is there so much story, but there's so much character development. And I think that if the devs didn't take any sort of liberties with that, then we probably wouldn't have gotten, what we did. And I don't want to spoil too much from, how far I am into the game, but I think it's pretty well known that there's time travel. I feel like most people should already know that going into it because it's in the first 30 seconds of the game. So that's not really spoilery. But when it comes to time travel, which isn't new to Zelda, by the way, I didn't think that it changed what actually happened in the Great Calamity in reference to Breath of the Wild, because it's not the same universe that they're the little egg bot did go through a little time portal, but that's not the current timeline. So personally, I think, again, only 10, 12, 15 hours in, the reality that the little egg baby, let's just say baby guardian, I don't know what to call that thing, the era where the baby guardian was originally is probably current day Breath of the Wild. Going through the little portal, I'm thinking is not just a back in time, but maybe a sidestep, like a parallel universe. So it's not as direct time travel as they were hoping, but I'm seeing a lot of smirks. So I'm going to pass it off to my panelists who clearly know a lot more than me, because I'm just spitting speculation.
So for me, you start to form these speculations like you have done, but the story for me still managed to catch me off guard. I knew there was time travel, I knew stuff was going to happen, but I was still waiting for certain things to happen from kind of Breath of the Wild that may or may not ever happen by the end of the story. But really, for me, that was a good thing, because it kept me on my toes. It kept me interested. I came to love these characters that, if you've played Breath of the Wild, the 4 champions die. Mm-hmm. So for me, I'm playing through and I'm going, right, how are they going to kill off the 4 champions? I've come to love these guys throughout this game. They've built these stories, they've built these characters up really damn well. I don't want them to die. How are they going to kill them off in front of me? And then obviously you find out what happens come the end of the game. But I think knowing what happens in Breath of the Wild is definitely a positive thing. It keeps you going. Mm-hmm. It's really cool.
Well, and to kind of echo what Sam was saying too, no matter what happens in Hyrule Warriors, what you learn in this game is very similar to, and I hate comparing this to Rogue One, because I think that is an easy comparison that everyone in the world has made, including myself. Mm-hmm. But no matter whatever happens in Age of Calamity, regardless of, is it a time split, is it a paradox, is it Doctor Who knows, it still makes what happened in Breath of the Wild have more weight. And so if you were to go through and reboot up Breath of the Wild, regardless of what happens, because it could be telling you the exact same story, it adds a context with that character building and with the kind of character development that what happens in that game hits hard still. because it adds more context. It adds a little bit more color into a story that was not very linear and did not have. It had linearity if you went and found it, and the certain cutscenes that you got that was indirect. But I will say that everyone has made fun of the Legend of Zelda timeline and the splits and the various things that can happen. And I will say that if there were to be another split or something like that, or if we were to kind of see different things, now that the timeline has been established, where they made like the official timeline that they're like, all right, let's connect all the dots. I think that they can, going forward, be a little bit more intentional with that, in a way that kind of lays it down, because at the end of the day, it's a very good story. It's a very cohesive story. Is it the story that everyone expects? Is it the story that everyone wants? Absolutely not. But that's part of consuming a narrative media, is that it's not going to be exactly what you want. We all watched the videos that was, what's going to happen and what does this mean, and oh my gosh, and it's maybe not what any of us wanted or expected, and it still plays like a really solid entry into the canon. Okay. And I don't know if that's a hot take. I don't know if I'm way off base. Sam, I don't know what you think, and we can talk about it later, but I think this game is canon.
Yeah, I think cohesive is the word that I wanted to write in my review like 20 different times, because it just does feel like this tight, compact story that works and does feel part of the canon and adds more to Breath of the Wild, and Breath of the Wild adds to this, and it just starts to create this really cool universe, whether it is one timeline, two timelines, 10 timelines. Like it starts to build like Breath of the Wild as its own separate Zelda world almost, and that I'm down for that.
So Sam, I want you to continue then, and we'll do another spoiler warning here for, let's just say, 2 to 5 minutes. Finishing the game, and then Nate, I want to go directly to you once Sam is done. Knowing how the game ends, and don't go too into the nitty gritty of the details, because again, I'm not there yet, but you can still do some spoilers. With the ending of the game, do you foresee any story DLC coming that is going to set up more links between Breath of the Wild and Age of Calamity, or maybe Breath of the Wild 2? Do you see any possible connections there? Where does the end of the story leave you?
So the end of the story is a kind of quite a cut and dry ending as far as I remember, but there is a lot of post-game stuff as well. I didn't really get to dive into any of the post-game stuff because reviewing games, I then had to jump straight from Age of Calamity into Immortals Phoenix Rising with no time in between. So as much as I'd have loved to play the post-game stuff, I didn't get a chance to. However, the way the map's laid out, the way the game is laid out, like there is time travel. There's certainly like the opportunity there for them to add some DLC, to add a few extra missions in, to toy with a few more of the characters, to potentially set up something for Breath of the Wild 2. Like, now this game is out, Breath of the Wild 2 could be anything. Like, it doesn't, now they've done this, it doesn't have to be a direct follow-up to Breath of the Wild. Like, it could be anything. So all bets are off for Breath of the Wild 2 now.
And I will agree with that the story ended, and it ended. And it was a great ending, credits roll, perfect. The post-game, I won't say that the post-game is teasing, like, it's not like a mid-credits for Marvel, where you're like, oh no, but this is going to happen. But it does leave room for a level of DLC. We also could get some DLC that shows what is going on from the enemy's perspective, like what they did with the original Hyrule Warriors, where you ended up playing through as Sia, and then you got to like a different kind of epilogue with everything. So I think that could be something too. In terms of connection to Breath of the Wild 2, I will say that there are a couple things with regards to a certain area that leaves an implication that they put that in there specifically because of the teaser trailer of Breath of the Wild 2.
I
and
would
that's all.
just throw
Without,
in. Okay, so you don't want to throw in those details. You want to keep it Easter egg
I
for people.
want there to be a little bit of whimsy in your life, Asa, and I don't want to ruin it for you.
I I appreciate that. Thank you for looking out for me.
But
Oh, go ahead, Sam. Sorry.
I was just going to say, like, I think, like we said, the story was cut and dry, good ending, like a real, just a real wholesome, happy ending, possibly. But if there is DLC, I would love to explore some more of the characters' backstories and stuff. Like now we've started to build on these characters. I would like to see more about each of their areas they live in and stuff like that. For me, that would be the way to go with the DLC. Take it back even further than that.
Yeah.
Just find out a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's look at the other side of practicality. So, yep, story makes sense. It's written well. Take it or leave it if you're looking at the Zelda timeline. But let's look at a more mechanical standpoint of practicality. The controls, the UI, the menu systems. How does everything feel?
I love the world map. Like, for me, if that's what we're talking about, I think giving us the freedom to go where we want it is something that Breath of the Wild done so well. So although with a Muso game, you're not a Warriors game, you're not going to get that big open world. They can't do that where you go from point A and just explore where you want. So this is the next best thing, letting you pick any mission anywhere on the map and kind of go where you want. It's a really clever way to give the player the freedom to explore where they want without actually letting you just go wild on that whole map.
Yeah, and I also thought that this was a nice, refreshing, and I would almost hope that they would take some of the aspects from this game and put it in Breath of the Wild too, where, if you're looking at the world map and, I don't believe that there were like too many side missions that popped up in the original game's map because, you just wanted to discover them and find them. But, if those instances were to pop up, I would love to just give people supplies. Read and see how it changed their lives after the fact, but then also get something tangible. Because I know that was a complaint from some people when it came to Breath of the Wild that, whenever they were doing side missions or they were doing instances or anything like that, that it was meaningless, that they didn't feel like they gained anything. And this would help remedy that situation. Because, like, for some of us, having those moments, just having an emotional moment with it, that was what we gained from it. But maybe if we can gain more, I don't know how they would fit it into a game like Breath of the Wild 2, but combos or stats or anything like that, like getting something from those moments and not making people feel like they have to travel to remote areas of the map into this small little alcove or anything like that just to experience these cool niche moments.
I agree with that. I will say that, like, later in the game, some of those tangibles are there, like different pieces of armor, and things like that are cool. Because then again, going kind of back to where this ties into Breath of the Wild 2, with being able to change your outfit as Link and being able to kind of change different pieces and different armor pieces, going around, you're able to get some of those from missions, but also from completing different things for people. And so I think that, I don't know, I really liked that. It kind of reminded me almost like the original Ni no Kuni, where you had like that message board where you were able to go and kind of help the citizens
yeah.
or the real life city. And it was very similar to that, where you were just getting like, oh, thanks so much kind of thing. And I liked it. I thought that was fun. I will say there were times, and I don't know if this is just because in real life I like to have my inbox at 0. There were a lot of things that were blinking on the map at once, and it did feel a little overwhelming at times where I was like, oh no, I have so much to do. And a lot of it was you just have to go and click a couple times and then read their story. But I think that it introduced something that could go into Breath of the Wild 2, where we get a little bit more of that, because perhaps Breath of the Wild 2, Hyrule is reestablished. And so you have those citizens that you can help out a little bit more. They're less sparse across the map.
Yeah. Talking about the menus, the one thing that I did notice that was, and maybe it was just me not getting fully used to the menu system yet, because there are different vendors that you go to for different things. I always found myself getting a little tripped up of, okay, wait a minute, I just want to go and just change my weapon or just change my armor as Link. So when I go into the next mission, it's already set. But then like, oh wait, no, I'm going to this vendor, but no, that vendor is just like upgrading my sword. I'm not actually changing my sword. So am I the only one that felt just a little bit of frustration there, that sometimes things felt like they weren't just, like when I'm looking at the world map, I naturally just want to hit the R or the L button to switch over to my character to then do things there. But that's not the case. Like you have to hit a separate button that goes to a separate menu to then customize your character. So that felt a little clunky, but other than that, the rest of the UI and the menu systems felt perfectly fluid and fine to me.
Yeah, I didn't particularly have any issues with it. I thought it flowed quite nicely. I had the same issues that I had in Breath of the Wild, where I would trigger the wrong way and go in the wrong direction from what I wanted. But other than that, like, not a issue for me, really.
There were a couple times where I wanted to change the weapon, but forgot. And so when I was going through, I was like, oh no, I already have started the mission. I can't just like do what I would do in like a real battle in Breath of the Wild. And so I was kind of with you there too, Asa, where I was like, oh no, I wanted to wear this outfit, or I wanted to use this two-handed weapon with Link versus a one-handed weapon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's nice that stuff doesn't break, but it sucks that you can't change it on the fly, that you have to back out of the mission, change it, and then go in with your preset. All right.
It was a bit boring. I kept Link with the Master Sword or with the one-handed weapon for the whole time. Like, I don't think I touched the spear or the two-handed weapon missions like at all for my sins. Like, for me, Link with his main sword, that's all I needed. So maybe that's why I didn't run into that.
Yeah, to me it was just like depending on the area that I was in. I did a lot of like, ooh, this outfit fits very well with this mission in this area that I'm in, and this weapon just feels like, all right, I have this giant staff and I'm wearing my Gerudo armor. It just all looks good together, and then I'll switch to my other sword in another mission. But so it really could just be an Asa problem. But let's round out practicality with the controls. As a Musou game, the controls felt really competent to me. I never felt like I didn't understand what I was doing, especially when it came to the combos. Everything flowed really well. The only thing that would ever trip me up would be I would very frequently forget that I have magical staffs. Like, I would forget that I have apples because I used it so infrequently. But like using the Sheikah Slate powers was like super easy. Like, I didn't have any issues there. I don't know about anybody else.
I use the apples often. I was dying left and right. No, it was in terms of like the kind of like control functionality. It did take just a little bit of time because I had played through the original Hyrule Warriors in anticipation, and this is a little bit more layered, and there's a lot more you can do. But it came a point in time where then I was able to chain combos and like use the different runes and use the different magical staffs as well for those kind of like elemental damages, and it took a minute, and it was like muscle memory where I knew in the heat of a battle I was able to like kind of click through. So it was very seamless. I only used the Pro controller except when I was playing in portable, and it felt really good on that controller.
Yeah, it was the first time I've busted out my Pro controller in a good year and a half, and I agree, it felt so nice on that controller. And I liked how they had the staffs as these kind of extra thing you could use. I thought that was a really cool addition. I was surprised at actually how kind of intricate the battling was. Like, it wasn't just button mash, button mash, button mash. You had the option to kind of add in the elemental attacks and kind of use a rune on the fly, and then if you're getting damaged, quickly eat an apple and carry on. Like, really free flowing, really quick, but lots of different options and choices within the battles.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say before we switch over to the next section is that I did notice that I hit a little bit of motion sickness when it came to just moving the camera around, and it could just be like I need to find that right sensitivity Because when the game initially started, it was way too slow for me. Like if I'm in that fast paced of a battle, I want to be able to like turn and fight the next enemy faster. But maybe I just made it too fast and the acceleration was just too much for me. But at least that was my personal experience, that I started to get a little bit of motion sickness, so I had to like dial that back some. So just something to look out for. But let's hop into the personality of this game. Let's talk about the story in particular as it stands as an original idea, because this is a Zelda game, not from just this is Koei Tecmo. Like this isn't just Nintendo. So let's talk about the VO work, because there are a lot of cutscenes. There is a lot of voiceover work, and it's incredible. And let's talk about some of those redeeming qualities that we really felt brought a lot of charm and personality to this game. And Sam, if you wouldn't mind starting this one off, what do you got?
So I've touched on some story points already. I'm going to dive straight into the characters and VO and veto everything I plan to say. Man, these characters are so cool. Like every one of the 4 champions is massively different in terms of personality. Mipha's the best. Urbosa is an absolute boss. Like Rivali is so good at being that pompous, unlikable character, but actually you kind of root for him. Daruk's like this lovable big guy. Like all of the 4 champions are brilliant. I think Zelda's awesome. I think just all of the character work, all of the character building is phenomenal for the type of game that it is.
I would have to agree. I will say that, and I don't want everyone to come after me, I don't necessarily love Zelda's voice acting. And that I don't know. That's the one that never stuck with me in the original Breath of the Wild, and I went to Japanese language like partway through the game for that. So I don't know if I might be in the minority with that, but that's okay. But other than that, like the personality was there. The characters were very friendly. It was cool to see some of the characters like Robbie and Purah and Impa as a younger version of themselves, because Impa, Wild, she's like very stoic and has seen a lot. And then Impa in Age of Calamity has a little bit of like she's a little unsure at the start, and so it was really cool to kind of see a version of that character that you have established now into kind of where they were prior to what happened 100 years ago. So overall personality was fantastic. I thought it was really well done. Maybe I'm just being sassy about Zelda, but that just didn't do it for me.
See, I'm on the other side of the coin. I really like Zelda's voice acting. I don't know what it is, because I don't think it's like award-worthy voice acting performance at all. But there's just something about that voice that kind of takes me back to Breath of the Wild and takes me back to the first day of owning my Switch and hear her say the blood moon's rising once again and all of that stuff. It's just, her voice is already kind of nostalgic to me. So hearing it so much within this was cool for me.
And I think, Nate, some of what you're feeling, I can resonate with that. It's interesting. I'm very much in the middle of the road, because Sam, I feel that way with Breath of the Wild. I very much enjoyed her voice acting in Breath of the Wild, but what I notice is that she has more lines in Age of Calamity. And I feel like that's where at least for me personally, that's where I started to see some of the areas that I didn't particularly like with her voice acting. Like, this is going to sound like the biggest nitpick, but she was a little too shrill for me at times. Maybe, I don't want to say, I don't know what it was. It was just like the pitch of her voice. But, like I said, in Breath of the Wild, she was charming. It was a fantastic performance. But it's just, now that she's got more lines to say, I did feel like, I just didn't enjoy it as much. But still, her character as a whole, I enjoyed her arc. The champions that I have seen so far, Urbosa and Mipha, like I said, I went for Mipha first. I love seeing these characters like 100 years prior. Like, I love seeing Sidon as like a little kid and being like, that's wild that like he does the little smile that when he grows up in Breath of the Wild, he's like this big cheese monster. And so just to see Like there is that constant comparison of like, let me see where you were 100 years prior, and just to see the character development that they've put in so much into the characters that I've played so far, and definitely highlighting Impa as well. Knowing that she was there side by side, I always wondered what it was like on the battlefield. But now actually seeing her there, and you know, I really want to go back and put another 300 hours into Breath of the Wild, knowing the information that I know now. I think that's Nate. I think you're the one that possibly brought it up. It's like now there's so much more weight wherever you stand on the story. There's so much more weight to all of these characters because you know what they lived through, like their backstories. And I think that was really, really well done. All of the characters are just brimming with personality, and that was like Zelda was my only critique. Like Impa's voice at the very beginning was a little. It took a little bit getting used to, just because I listened to the Japanese trailer first, and I really liked the Japanese voice acting. But overall, everyone else was really, really good.
Just quickly in terms of characters before we move on to kind of other points within this area, you're in for a treat, Asa, with the rest of the characters who are still to come, because you've got your ones you would expect. Obviously, the other couple of champions, and I'm pretty sure, potential spoiler, but I'm sure it was broadcast everywhere beforehand, like the King. So you've got those to come, but my goodness, are there some unexpected characters, which just blew me away. It was just such a cool addition to be able to kind of play as some of these characters that I never in a million years would have even expected to be able to play as.
Yeah, so one thing I'll say about the personality of this game too, and Asa, you brought it up when you said, hey Sam, hey Nate, how is this with Hyrule Warriors? Were the devs able to kind of sneak in some of their personality too? And to kind of, mild spoiler warning, to kind of piggyback off what Sam said, some of the characters that get unlocked, though they fit in the world of Breath of the Wild, are very much Koei Tecmo and the original Hyrule Warriors being intentional with who from Breath of the Wild is in the game. And that was really cool to see too, because it's by the point that you unlock certain characters, it's a very different story. And so you're able to, it fits and flows really in a really unique way. Okay. So their personality does shine through different parts of it.
Does it at all feel like adding in those new characters, because you said it's a different story at that point, do you feel like it detracts at all from what they were maybe starting with before those characters are introduced?
I wouldn't say so, because those characters are not mandatory. So there are certain characters like the champions where you are put in a mission and you are that character and you can only be that character.
Right.
And when you unlock characters, you have like a training mission or maybe 2 or 3 training missions that are specific to that person, but they're not story focused. So it was more kind of like a fun addition. And it was also kind of funny because you could be playing through some of the more serious story ones where you're able to pick 2 or 3 different people to switch between, and to just throw in one of those wild card characters was hilarious. And I would do that every once in a while after I played through it, because I wanted to have reverence for the story. I would replay that mission and like throw in one particular person I'm thinking of, and it was hilarious.
Okay, I imagine that person's probably the same one that I like to throw in there just for.
I think so.
For fun.
Is it? Okay, I'm not gonna try and guess, but is it something that like you just want people to discover in the moment when it happens, or do you feel like if I tell you, like if you were to tell people and tell me now, that it wouldn't take away from the magic? Because I'm so curious. That's basically what I'm getting. I'm really curious.
For me, it was really cool to be like, holy shit. Like, there's one that I think surprised me that might be relevant to the story.
Okay.
And the others that you kind of unlock by doing side missions. I think the first one that I unlocked through the story, or there was one that I unlocked through the story that was like, holy crap, am I really going to be able to play as this person? And then it was like, yes, I am. And it was a cool moment of like, oh, damn, like I can actually play as this person. And that's the one who I kept coming back to every now and again. I'm pretty sure
we're talking about different ones than Sam.
Are we? Okay.
One of the ones where you went around 4 different specific things to get the specific things.
Okay. Character. Yeah, probably different ones.
Son of a gun. Okay, yep, don't tell
We're
me.
just trying to confuse you,
Yeah,
Asa.
yeah. I'm like my theories in my head are all over the place, and I don't want to do a guessing game because it's just not worth it. But all right, let's jump into the last section of this review discussion, and let's talk about playability. Let's talk about the difficulty of the game itself, the missions, your enjoyment, and do you see yourself going back to it? The replayability factor. And I'll say, just starting off, based off of what I've done so far, of course I'm going to put in the time and I'm going to finish the game and I'm going to do the post game stuff, but I could easily see myself coming back and, I've already talked about it before where I'll go back and grind missions. And Nate, you even just said it, like you'll, and Sam, you as well, like you'll go back and play with new characters that you've unlocked just to see them in those situations or just to play as those characters more. So when it comes to like the playability factor, in going back and being replayable, I think it's very, very high. And I think that's just Muso's in general. Like there's just so much diversity in the way that characters, the way that they handle and their fun factor. But I'm having so much fun playing with everybody. I would say that I probably don't play as Link as much as I thought that I would, which is like really, really surprising to me. I just really enjoy everybody's unique skill set so much that I just don't gravitate to him as much as I was hoping that I would. And then the other character that I would say I'd probably play is the least would be Zelda, just because I struggle some with using the Sheikah Slate as my only weapon. Like there were just a few instances where I'm like, I want you to be able to do this and you can't do it and you're not doing it. And it's frustrating because there's so much, like, I don't want to spoil anything because I really I dumped a lot into upgrading her in hoping that something would unlock and it would just like really click with me. But sadly, Zelda, I think you're probably like my least favorite playable character. Because just like in a grand battle sense, it just doesn't fit as well. In the ones where you have like 3 people and you're doing different missions, sure, I'll pull you along because I love some of the things that she can do. Like again, her remote bomb, that's probably my favorite one out of all of them. But yeah, the game's super fun. I never felt like the difficulty was like too unreasonable. I'm playing on normal. I never thought it was too hard. Anytime that I screwed up in a mission, I just felt that extra pull to meet that challenge where it was.
Yeah, I agree on Zelda. There was times she just felt too random. Like you'd be attacking with her and she would be stasis and bombs and like there was just almost too much going on that it was just felt a bit unpredictable for me. Whereas if I'm using a Link, I know like, oh, he's gonna swing his sword a few times and do this. Whereas with Zelda, she felt a bit random. But in terms of replayability, like I will 100% when I find time be going back to this and probably start it from scratch again and try the different characters and do missions in a different order and just appreciate it. There's definitely a lot of replayability.
How many hours are you in?
I think I put 32 hours in. My review was rushed is the wrong word, but I had to leave a few of the side missions out. So I want to go back and really be able to do every side mission. Like I've done a heck of a lot of the side missions, but I'd love to be able to go back and do all of them.
Yeah.
I would say the replayability is high for all of the reasons that both of you said. To unlock the true ending, which I'm not there yet, there is a good amount of stuff that you have to do and replay and kind of get to complete the ending, which adds to it. I think I'm about 40 hours in right now. Okay. I think I probably have 10 to 20 more hours before I unlock the main game.
Good.
The final ending.
What?
So I'm also a completionist, so part of it is that's on me.
Yeah, but that's me too. Like you're spelling out the doom of my future. Oh,
it's a good doom because you can once you beat the game, it's cut and dry, and then the rest is just icing on the cake. To go back to what I will say though is, so mild spoiler warning. Come back in a minute. There is a reason why Zelda is nerfed. That's all I will say, Asa. Is there a reason? There's a reason why they nerfed her, because you and I had a conversation when this first came out, and we were like, what happened to the rapier Zelda in the original Hyrule Warriors that was boss, and she killed everyone, and it was great. And so all I will say is there's a reason.
Second half of the game Zelda is a different beast.
Good, because original Hyrule Warriors, Smash, freaking Cadence of Hyrule. Like, there are so many versions of Zelda that are so good and so powerful and so much fun that I was like, what? This is it? Like, you mean that if I just do the basic light heavy, that I just swing a block back and forth? Oh, I was so frustrated by that.
I completely forgot about that when I poo-pooed her. But thinking about it, that's another kind of really cool moment when you get the alternative moves that she has, because that's a real like linking moment between Breath of the Wild and Age of Calamity.
Oh wow!
From a narrative perspective, it makes sense. Like, it was because same thing. I was so mad because I was like, she looked badass in the trailers too, and then you play it and you're like, this is useless. I hate her. I never want to play as her. And from a story standpoint, she isn't able to do anything. She wasn't able to do anything in Breath of the Wild. Like, that was the whole point. And so it was a really good decision for the team to make.
Okay. Fair.
You've got a lot to discover.
Yeah. And so does Dudetta Prime from Twitter, who gave us this message here. I'm about 5 hours in. I've done a few missions. I've played as a divine beast, so still early, but with a decent amount played, I really love the gameplay, especially compared to the first Hyrule Warriors. The one thing that's tripping me up so far is it's so much like Breath of the Wild, but I can't climb. I was trying to evade a guardian, but my instinct was to climb and glide away, but instead I ended up jumping off the wall right into it. The limitations on what you can do kind of breaks the immersion for me. It's so much like Breath of the Wild, but it also very much isn't. I'm still enjoying my time with it and definitely am going to finish it over the holiday. Does that resonate? Does Dudetta Prime's statement resonate with you all, like, to where you constantly felt, and I know we talked about it briefly at the beginning, where this game feels so much like Breath of the Wild that once you get into the gameplay, you're smacked into a Musou game. Was it ever immersion breaking for you? Were there ever times where you're like, man, I really just want to climb and get away in this moment?
No, because it does a good job of making you feel powerful enough that you can kind of take anything on. Whereas in Breath of the Wild, that was one of my gripes. Not necessarily that I couldn't climb or run away, but enemies didn't feel as fearsome as they did in Breath of the Wild. If I saw a Lionel or a Guardian in Breath of the Wild, it's like, right, I really need to think, am I going to fight? Am I going to run? What's my tactic? Whereas in Age of Calamity, it's like, right, it's a Lionel, let's go and take it on. Let's use my weapon. That was kind of the immersion breaking bit for me, that they had to balance it in a slightly different way to what they did in Breath of the Wild. I don't think I particularly missed the climbing. Like, I actually learned to incorporate the wall jumps into my gameplay, so I could jump and glide away from certain bits of danger and then re-enter combat from a different angle. Like, I learned to live with that. It was just the kind of differing kind of fear factors of each of the enemies that took me out a little bit. But again, it's a Musou game. I knew that they would have had to do something like that anyway. So,
and I feel that impact too. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Nate.
Well, I was just going to say, so to Dudetta Prime's point, I had a similar experience, because there are some parts where you're like locked onto some bigger enemies and you're in like one of the forts or the outkeep post things, and it gets a little tight and the camera angle gets funny, and I'm like, if I could just climb up and just boop right over them, everything would be fine. So I felt what they're feeling. What I will say is, to Sam's point, I started figuring out, okay, if I wall jump at this angle, I can glide off. Or if I do the rune for the ice, I can also jump and kind of go away too. So there were a couple times where it got a little hairy, and then I was able to better use that to my advantage and be a little bit more tactical in those tighter spaces.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And what I was gonna say, Sam, you had mentioned like taking out some of that fear factor, because this game isn't very hard. I think it's really just about enjoying it. Like there are some overwhelming moments, but talking specifically about the Lionel, because facing one for the first time in Breath of the Wild, like not the one that was like within a story mission, but just seeing one in the world and going and deciding, I think I'm ready and I'm going to take it on. Like that was a major impactful moment. Like I remember looking at my inventory. Do I have enough meals? Is my stamina up? Do I have enough like weapons? All right, I'm going to use this one first and it's going to break and then I'm going to jump to this one. Like there was so much strategy. But this one was like, all right, Link, Zelda, Impa, let's just gang up on this fool and just wreck him. And there wasn't like a lot of, I can't think of the word, but I didn't feel like I had anything to lose. Like if I would die, it was what it was, and we just like restart that encounter. So there was some of that, like that gravity that was lost, I think, just with some of the encounters. But yeah, anything else that you guys want to throw in about playability? Because now we're going to start to wrap up our final thoughts.
I would just say, oh, go ahead, Sam.
No. Mine was leading into final thoughts. So you go ahead now.
I was just going to say, Asa, one thing you said too is if you died, you would just kind of restart at that part of the whole mission. And some of those missions were like 30 minutes long.
Yeah.
Depending on how you played. And so it was nice because there were times that I was dying. And so I was like, okay, cool. Now I don't have to restart this whole thing. But there were other times where I was very much, hey, the stakes aren't there because I'm not, if I die beating this Lionel and this Lionel and then this electric Lionel all at the same time, I'm just going to be able to restart this right now at the same point. And it just, there was a little bit of like low stakes with that.
Yeah. All right. So Sam, is it going to be a segue statement or do you want to save it to get to your moment?
I'll save it for final thoughts. You start to wrap.
So here we are, folks. We've come all the way through. We've talked about the presentation of the game. We've talked about the performance of the game, the practicality, the personality, and the playability. So all that said, we're going to jump into our final thoughts. How do we feel about the game as a whole, as a package, a tight unit? Do we feel like all of these different parts work together well? Is it worth the entry? And I want to start off with, I know, Nate, I'd put you on there, but Sam, I could feel that you were chomping at the bit. I want you to start off. What are your final thoughts about Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity? And don't worry, folks, we're not throwing review scores on it. This is a review discussion. If you want to know the review scores, please go read Sam's article. Please go read Nate's article. There you can get their specific review scores and their thoughts. But yeah, sorry. Sam, take it away.
So yeah, final thoughts. If you're a Zelda fan, a Breath of the Wild fan, it's a must play. Even if you're a Muso fan, like it's a great Muso game. But for those who like the story of Breath of the Wild, this really builds on it. And something that I wanted to add to the story, it builds on the lore as well, not just the whole big story, but you find out little bits and pieces that you didn't know that you wanted to know. So you find out kind of where the Sheikah Towers come from, and you start to see Hyrule crumbling around you to how it is in Breath of the Wild, like little bits of attention to detail and little bits of lore building in the game that just really work. So anyone who's interested in anything about Breath of the Wild, like it's an absolute must play. And if you can look past the combat, like being different to how it is in Breath of the Wild, then you're going to have a blast.
All right, Nate, your final thoughts on Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity.
It is worth the price of entry. It is very much worth the price of entry. It is not just a spin-off. It is part of the lore, like Sam said. It's part of Zelda. It is canon. Unless someone comes out officially and says it's not canon, it's canon. Suck it up. It's great. It really does feel like a true Zelda title, and it did, in my opinion, what Breath of the Wild couldn't, which is have that linear story, because it is a linear game where you are able to kind of experience it as it's happening and not get fragments of it. And so I think that it had a really strong story. and some of those playable characters are wild. So it's a fun treat for everyone. It's not at the level where you're going to be able to play as um, like Midna or anything kind of like crazy out there, but there are some that are within the Breath of the Wild lore that you're just going to go, oh wow, and then you're going to have so much fun with it. So I mean, it's one of my best games, one of my favorite games of 2020, behind Hades. I would say it's number two.
How dare you bring up another game? No, I'm with you on Hades. But there are our final thoughts. I think it's pretty safe to say that we recommend that you check out this game. It's definitely worth the time, definitely worth the money. But before I start to personally wrap things up, first of all, I want to say thank you to Nate, thank you to Sam for being on, and also to throw it out there. Sadly, Miss Fushi couldn't join us. We were going to be a panel of 4, but with scheduling in 2020 being what it is, we weren't able to make it happen. So definitely make sure you go check out Miss Fushi's content on Age of Calamity. All right, before I do closing and I tell people where to go to follow your guys' stuff, let's talk about our stands. Our hot favorite characters, our mains, because I'm really curious, and try to not make it be one of those secret unlockable characters that I have not seen yet. Please. If possible. But
Sam, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, Sam, who's your main?
From a story standpoint, I loved Mifa.
Mm-hmm.
I think her relationship with Link was awesome. I think the way she plays is really fun as well. She's maybe a little bit too weak to kind of main. I played a lot as Link, as boring as that is, and then a couple of the later characters made my main party towards the end game. So I struggled a little bit with Impa, just because, again, she's quite surprisingly complex with her different attacks and the way she does things. So yeah, I was kind of generally Link and Mifa early on, and then adding a few of the newer ones later.
Similar experience with Impa, but also she was so overpowered. So I felt as if I was cheating, because if you get all the steals and she has all of her clones, it's game over in 30 seconds. I will say that my main oscillated between Urbosa and late game Zelda. And those were my two back and forth throughout the whole thing. There's a third one that made it into the final 2 or 3 missions that will remain a secret.
Son of a
but
God.
It got to the point where I started to start as Zelda and would only go to other characters when I had to, and then would come back to Zelda. Zelda turned it around for me in such a way where I was like, you are my main from now on.
Wow.
So.
Wow.
I just want to make a point about the King of Hyrule. How awesome it is. You can kind of, again, spoilers light. I'm going to keep it light, but you can kind of switch him mid-battle. Kind of the way he plays and his outfit. And that was just a real cool throwback to Breath of the Wild as well.
And if we're going to bring the King up, he was the one that I was talking about. The King was in my party at the end, like the whole time.
I figured he was going to make it in. I was like, there's no way they're not going to bring in King Rome.
He's fantastic. Like, chef's kiss. Like, he's great.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I brought him up earlier, and I'm pretty sure it's made clear in the trailers or in some earlier content that he's playable. If not, I've spoiled that and ruined it for you, and I'm sorry. But
and he was available in the original Hyrule Warriors, like in some way, shape, or form. But
I know for DualShockers content, for just a news article that I'd written that he was a playable character, so I'm sure it was announced at some point ahead of time.
And I would say where I am in the game so far, Impa is my favorite, purely for the reason that you said, Nate. Like, she's way OP. Like, it's so cool to see her as like a frail old lady on like the edge of her life in Breath of the Wild, and like looking back to her heyday where she's just like, you can like teleport from person to person and like never get hit by anybody and take out an entire crowd. Like, it's ridiculous. Mifa, phenomenal. I just got to Urbosa, so I just need a little bit more time, but I did enjoy her. And Link, I'd put it at third just because he's that all-round, like, he's not bad at anything, but he's not, like, super excelling at everything. But yeah, I would say probably Impa is my favorite. But I'm excited to see how that's going to change with some of these hidden characters that y'all are talking about. But okay. Thank you so much, Nate. Thank you so much, Sam, for being on. I'm gonna start with our guest, Sam. Where can people find you? Where can people read your review, watch a review, anything, all the above? It is all.
So yeah, follow me on Twitter, Captain Woodsy, Captain, and then Woodsy WOODSY. Can't even spell my Twitter handle. And then you can find all of my writing over on DualShockers.com. If you just search Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity review, you'll be able to find that on there. If you're interested in any of my other stuff, you can then click my name. I've been crazy with reviews recently. I've not got a lot of sleep. You'll also be able to find my Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon, and the Blade of Light review, and my Immortals Phoenix Rising review, which I've managed to play and write all three of those reviews within the last 2.5 weeks. So I'm very tired. Yeah, and so that's where you'll find me, Twitter and DualShockers.
All right, Nate.
On Twitter and Instagram, you can find me at the Nate Pretzel, so like the food. And then our Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity review is up on borderlineentertainment.com and is in the reviews tab, and we've got some other fun reviews in there as well. So I'm excited to kind of dive further into that.
Yeah, and you can find me at agreenriver07 on Twitter, and if you could, please read my review for Immortals Phoenix Rising. Read Sam's first. His is probably a lot better. But then if you can go read mine, because that's a good time. And then we recently did a discussion for the Game Awards, and we had Mr. Badbit from the Trophy Room podcast, and we had Jenny Wyndham from Rose City Games. So that was a really good discussion there, and it was hosted by our very own Josh Biddick. But yeah, just please, if you could, follow anybody. Search Borderline Entertainment on all of your social media services, on YouTube. Well, if you're on YouTube, you're already here, so make sure you hit that subscribe. But on twitch.tv/Borderline Entertainment, we've got streams every single week. Thank you again so much. I appreciate you both greatly. I hope everybody watching has a wonderful time with Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. But until next time, be well, Borderline family. Be well.